Record reflect, we are back in session. Parties and council are present. I think it's starting to get just a little bit cooler, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So you may continue your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. So if we can have the lights dim up front. We were looking at Exhibit 35, where you said you wanted to focus in on that part of the table with the light glare behind it. And you did crop out that picture, correct?
Yes.
And I'll show you 1073 as the exhibit, as a crop in of that picture.
That is?
And that shows from more of a mid-range kind of shot, would you be fair to say?
Yes.
And you zoomed in closer to that same area where the white spots were, correct?
Correct. That area being in the upper right-hand corner, again, near the very tail end of the knit beanie.
And I'll show you 1074. Again, can you see those same white marks you saw from the angle from standing on the rug looking towards the kitchen?
Yes. What is depicted here are the stains that actually match up to the stains on the previous exhibit, that exhibit being the stains on the wood table, where the white stains and the red stains were visible.
And you kind of drew that out on these photographs, correct?
I did.
So I'll go to the next exhibit, 10075. This is the first angle, and you kind of did these markings and wording on this, correct?
Correct.
And can you highlight what's kind of written on there and what you drew onto the exhibit 1075?
Yes, I located several different areas of white smudges and stains and labeled them for reference as A, which I'm circling, is kind of a large area with several different white stains. B being the stain that was shaped kind of like a shepherd's staff, kind of a J, a long J kind of shape. C marked a kind of a smaller white stain. D was a little larger. E was the stain that appeared kind of a elongated stain, which appeared to have a staining inside in the totality of the stain, more solid appearance, as opposed to G, which was just an elongated, like a perimeter of a stain, the border. So F was a smaller stain as well, but was kind of distinguishing, a little more visible, F was, than C. So I marked those areas for reference, and then I added 2 black arrows. One black arrow on the area marked as B, like boy, that was parallel to the staff area of the long area of the shepherd's staff. It was, for lack of a better way to describe that. So in essence, that long piece is parallel to this line, the black line. Then I wanted for reference to mark the rounded edge of the elongated stain that I marked as E, and put an arrow that would lead from that rounded edge to the edge of the circular or elongated stain, which was marked as G.
And then you did the red circles, correct, on the reddish-brown stains you saw?
Correct, and I marked kind of an overall showing that there are red stains all around those white stains on the table.
And you did that because of the lighting from here. It's a light. Can you describe the lighting on this photograph and why you can see everything?
Yes, this photograph, exhibit 1075, is not dealing with glare from sun reflecting on the surface. So the other exhibits where the glare appeared to highlight some staining, I wanted to mark this area, A through G, for those white stains, and then see if I could find other stains similar on a different exhibit where the glare of the table was being highlighted.
And I'll go to exhibit 176. Can you describe what this exhibit shows?
Yes, exhibit 1076 is a close-up cropped photo, which is grainy because it is cropped. And what's depicted is very faint on the big screen. So A marks several areas of white colored smudges and stains. Same with B. B, what's depicted near the arrow, the same arrow showing parallel to the shepherd's staff shaped stain. And then C is only like a shadow here. Same with D. E is a little better, but there's some distortion that's happening with the shape of the stains because of the perspective the photograph is taken from. So that the elongated stain, marked as E, is more compressed in its appearance. You can see the rounded edge and a point, but it's very compressed and distorted. F is pretty much, with this enlargement, I can't see pretty much anything with F. A different photograph shows it. Same with G, so they're more like shadows when it's projected on the big screen here. So a photograph that is not as grainy will show these in more detail.
And can you see any of the reddish-brown stains that were identified by the red circles with this angle and alternate lighting?
No, I did not see any reddish-brown stains at all. In this exhibit, 1076, or the one even prior to this, which was more of a mid-range cropping of the image.
And so, when you didn't see the red stains, did you start trying to do research to see if you could figure out what those red stains could have been?
Yes, and research on why potentially I could not see those red stains. What would explain that? If they were on the surface, the white stains appeared to be visible on the surface, the red stains were not. So I therefore, as part of the crime scene reconstruction of evidence, is to do some experimenting and see if I could determine what caused that.
And while doing that, did you notice some of your furniture that you owned actually had similar reddish-brown, like circle stains?
Yes.
And did you take pictures of that furniture and lay them in comparison to the red stains found on the table?
Yes.
And I'll show you 1077. Would this be the comparison that you did between the two items?
Yes. I cropped a photograph showing red stains, red, reddish brown, however you want to describe them, on the McStay table, and then on my own personal wood furniture, I have the same stains on a chair, which again appeared to be similar in size and appearance.
With the darker coloring on the edge, lighter in the middle?
Correct. Where it appears that it is definitely was some type of a liquid. That's what that is consistent with, where the edges dry first. We have edges that are depicted on the McStay table and lighter on the inside. Same with my wood furniture. And again, these both stains were consistent in that they didn't have a lot of, I didn't see really any stains that had directionality, that were very elongated. Just these appeared to be stains that were some type of a spatter, whether it was the flicking of a paintbrush with stain on it, or whether it was an impact of something. So that's when I decided to do some other investigation.
And is that when you started to check with alternate light sources with your chair?
Well, alternate light being, I started checking with light reflecting. So sunlight coming in my window at my home to see how this spatter on my furniture, if it would be visible in reflected light or not.
Okay, we'll go to the next one, which are two exhibits shown side by side, correct? 1078 and 1079.
Correct.
Can you explain what those two exhibits show?
Okay. So 1078 and 1079 are the same section of my wood stained chair where there is spatter visible on 1078, at least on the side of the chair, the spatter is visible because of it within this reflection that is from approximately 2 feet 5 inches up to 2 feet 8 inches in a ruler, a tape measure I used. That same area with the reflection did not show any of the spatter stain on my wood chair. On exhibit 1079, however, that same general area, kind of cropped from 5 to 7 inches, the same spatter pattern on 1078 on the side of the chair is visible on the side of the chair on exhibit 1079. Even what appears to be kind of a swipe stain. Notice if you look real close, there's even some of the stain itself has contact here, some type of a swipe or transfer that appears to be part of the wood stain itself when the table was made. That is also depicted in exhibit 1079. However, without the interference of the sun causing glare, on exhibit 1079, that spatter is visible.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes.
I spoke with the clerk and we thought there was an error somewhere else. I want to correct these. I mislabeled these. This is 1080 and 1081. Just so we're on the same page. And I would also, just so, since it's hard to visualize there, Your Honor, I'm going to actually ask to publish the actual exhibits to the jury and they can compare them in their hand as well. And so based on this glare, did you start to develop a hypothesis of what you were seeing on the chair?
Yes.
And what was that?
The hypothesis was that when the chair was manufactured and as a piece of wood furniture, most often as I've investigated furniture, a top coat of polyurethane or some other type of a substance is used to coat the surface of wood furniture. Therefore, any stain, antiquing type spatter is underneath that top coat of polyurethane or whatever, and then the glare of light, whether it's sunlight or any other light, the glare is going to reflect on the surface of the polyurethane, that top coat, and therefore not, as observed, not cause whatever part of anything underneath that top coat to be visualized.
Okay. And so, to test the hypothesis, did you do something with your chair?
Yes.
And what did you do?
I got permission from my wife to spatter fake blood on my chair in my living room with proper precautions of carpet.
And I'll show you 1082. If we can go the light to darker, just on the very front, if that's possible, by the screen.
So here in exhibit 1082 is my wood chair along with paper targets that I placed on each side of the wood, so I used the same fake blood as demonstrated here in court to put some blood on the polyamide glove. Obviously I put a lot more than I did here in court with just 15 drops. I then impacted the liquid blood and caused an impact pattern to be a lot more substantial than what you saw in court because there was more volume of blood.
And you did a zoom-in picture of this as well, correct?
Yes.
And that's 1083?
So 1083, you see the elongated stains, which are converging to this area of origin. See, the elongated stains would all converge to this area at about 2 feet. And some of the fake blood spattered up onto the side of the chair. And on the edge of the chair, you can see some of the volume being a heavier volume. Gravity's causing it to drip down toward the floor. But there are stains, again here, these stains that are about 2 feet 5 inches to 2 feet 8. That area is what was depicted in the other exhibit we talked about.
And then you decided to take another close-up picture with both the blood stain and the reddish brown stain, correct?
Yes.
And that's 1084?
Yes, so 1084, what I've marked is with red circles 4 different areas of the fake blood that is on top of all of this spatter, which is part of the wood. That's part of the staining antique effect. So all of this, but yet these stains, these 4 areas, there's kind of 2 in one circle here in the middle, 2 very small ones, but they blend in. So the same fake blood spatter stains depicted in photo number 2, which you'll see, are visible on the wood surface, as is the wood stain spatter that is actually part of the table finish. The wood finish stains are visible as long as there is no glare from light. And this is exhibit 1084.
And we go to 1085, you took the same picture with the glare effect, correct?
Correct.
And Your Honor, I have both 1084, 1085, and I'll publish these to the jury as well in case they can't see it too well on the overhead. And could you explain what we see in 1085?
Yes, in exhibit 1085, there's some distortion because of the angle of the photograph to have just catching the glare at the right position. So the numbers are distorted, as you can see. 6, 7, 8, and 9 are distorted, as is the orientation of the 4 areas that I've identified as the fake blood that's on the surface of the top coat of the wood chair. So this photo was cropped, and the distortion is indicated here in exhibit 1085. But the same fake blood spatter stains as depicted in photo 1 are visible on the wood surface. However, the wood stain spatter that is part of the table finish is not visible. So if you look at all this area where the glare is, that's a glare reflecting off of the top coat of the wood finish itself. Therefore, those stains aren't visible. What's visible on the edge, that spatter as part of the chair is visible because there's no glare to obstruct it or block it.
So based on your review of the photographs from the McStay home, the experiments you did on your own furniture that had similar red stains, were you able to draw a conclusion as to the reddish-brown stains that are seen in the photographs of the table inside the Fallbrook house?
Yes.
And what is your conclusion and opinion?
My opinion, after doing all these experiments and making my observations, is that it's not blood that's on the surface. It's not anything that's on the surface. It's underneath the top coat, which is why it's not visible. And so, therefore, that explains why the white stains are visible, the reddish-brown stains are not.
And that would explain why it's on the top, the sides, the legs, but not on any of the seam, floor, carpet, and everything else.
Correct.
Now, based on everything you reviewed, you earlier said that you saw no sign of damage to the house with the doors, walls, windows. See no sign of blood, no sign of blood spatter. Do you have an opinion of whether or not any violent acts occurred within that house?
No violent acts that would have caused bloodshed in a way that would be consistent with blunt force trauma. Could be other violent acts, but just not that would cause bloodshed.
Now, there are different places of the walls that are bare of pictures or drapes or anything, and there was paint in the house. What if someone just painted over blood spatter? Is that still detectable?
Potentially it is, yes.
And how's that?
Using an alternate light source, there is a potential of blood, if there's enough blood on a surface and it's painted over, the alternate light source on its own could have that blood absorb the light so it could be visible potentially underneath the paint itself. So you can see that shadowing through the paint.
And based on the carpets throughout the house and the cleanliness of the floors and the baseboards on all the walls, do you see any evidence of a blood pattern that could have been painted over?
I don't see any evidence of blood being painted over. But again, that's just visually looking at it. You wouldn't see that unless you had an alternate light source.
So the injuries that were described by Dr. Chang Sri, do you have any opinion of whether or not the extent of those injuries were received by the McStay family inside their home?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Do you see any evidence that would support the idea that they received the totality of those injuries inside their Fallbrook home?
Same objection and relevance.
Sustained as lack of ventilation and cumulative to his previous opinion.
Now, you've had to recreate crime scenes based on the evidence you see, strike that. You've had to recreate crimes based on the evidence you see at a crime scene. Would that be fair to say?
Recreate crime?
Like you could say how a crime occurred or what the evidence shows you happened.
Potentially you can, yes.
And that is something you've done throughout your years at the crime lab and subsequent to being, well, now you're a consultant. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
And some of the things you'll look at is not only the either the evidence left at the scene, but also the circumstance in which evidence is found.
Yes, take into consideration everything.
So if a body is located in a shallow grave, wrapped up in a blanket, tied with straps and cords around the outside of the blanket, with tire depressions leading up to that grave site, does in the body of the deceased found within the grave had suffered multiple injuries to extremities, to fractured ribs, and blunt force trauma to the head, which are determined to be the cause of death. Under those type of facts, would you have an opinion as to the possible locations where that individual could have been killed?
Objection calls for speculation, lacks foundation, assumes facts not in evidence.
Well, Your Honor, everything I described, the facts are in evidence, so I object to that, and he's offering his opinion as
Your Honor,
an
wants to
The
sidebar.
objection sustained as lack of foundation, calling for speculation and conclusion.
Can I be heard?
Sure, counsel approach.
Who asked to be heard? I'm sorry.
I did.
Ready, Your Honor.
All right, the last objection is sustained as calling for speculation and conclusion.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Beasley, based on the injuries that were sustained by the McStay family, if they were delivered, as Dr. Changsri said, with blunt force trauma with a 3-pound sledgehammer, would you expect to see blood spatter that had come onto contact with the assailant or killer?
Objection calls for speculation, assumes certain facts not in evidence.
Oh,
Yes, I would.
And what part of the assailant's body would you anticipate seeing some type of blood spatter based on the injuries testified to?
Objection lacks foundation, calls for speculation.
oh,
Assumes facts not in evidence.
I would expect to see blood spatter from head to toe, with the primary area of blood spatter being the area closest to the victims, which would typically be the chest area, chest and stomach area. That is what I observed during experiments, so that's how I know that, because of my training and experience. Also, the sleeves of clothing would have blood spatter as well. Pants would have blood spatter, shoes would have blood spatter. So I would expect blood spatter to be even potentially on the back of someone's shirt even, because when blood is impacted, it is dispersed everywhere, and it'll go up and it will come raining down right on clothing. So I would expect a lot of blood spatter to be on the clothing of someone doing this type of an event.
And this blood spatter that would find its way into the assailant or killer, would it be enough blood to where it could possibly transfer onto other things that the person came in contact with?
Yes,
And examples of that, as we discussed earlier, could be a vehicle they get in,
yes,
anybody they come in physical contact with,
yes,
any object they come in contact with beyond the vehicle, correct?
correct.
And let's just say they had it on their clothing or on their shoes, as you discussed, you check the seats or floorboards. That's something that would be able to be spotted using any kind of investigative tools if you couldn't see it with the naked eye?
Yes, a blood enhancement type of a reagent, for example.
Yes.
Yeah,
And what are
correct.
some examples?
Correct, fluorescein is something I used at the lab when I was still working at the Sheriff's Department. Luminol is another reagent that I use at the crime lab as well. There is something similar now used that I've heard about called Blue Star, and I've been to conferences and have seen that. It's a similar type of a reagent that will react with faint or diluted blood.
And with that, if someone was to have a vehicle of a suspect, as long as it wasn't cleaned thoroughly and perfectly, is there still a chance of detecting any kind of blood that could have been left at the scene?
Yes.
And based on your review of the reports and the testimony, was any such evidence found inside Mr. Merritt's vehicle?
There was, as I recall, an area on the seat, on the back side of the bench seat in Mr. Merritt's former truck that did fluoresce using Blue Star. However, it was determined at the lab not to be blood because of the more confirmatory test that I believe was orthotolidine used by a criminalist named Don Jones.
And I believe his testimony was any DNA in that sample did not come back to any known persons in this case.
Correct. The DNA didn't match and it was not blood. So it may not even have been what was fluorescing, could have been something different than what this was swabbed.
And what is a common practice to ensure that what you're fluorescing and what you're swabbing are necessarily the same thing?
A control swab could be taken from an area near the stain. So that way, if there's something on the background that could give a DNA sample, for example, it could be different than what's on the stain itself, what's reacting or fluorescing. So in other words, there could be DNA all over that seat, but yet what's fluorescing in a stain is something different. So taking a control swab of that area away from the stain would be of normal practice to help determine if there was some type of other contamination or substances all over the seat.
And just one final question. In the investigation and processing of the how, no, strike that. I'm not going to ask that question. No further questions.
All right, it's after 4:15, it's still a little bit warm in here, so we'll go ahead and take our evening recess at this time till 9:30 tomorrow morning. Hopefully, we'll get the air conditioning working and it'll be a little bit more comfortable in here tomorrow. Keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case. And again, that means not discussing anything about the case, any of the witnesses' testimony, exhibits, parties, or attorneys. And we'll see everyone back 9:30 tomorrow morning.